you've come from many parts of the country, so I just want to thank you sincerely for the journeys that you have made. I'd also like to welcome in advance the TDs that are going to be here with us, and I see Senator Andrews has just come in. You're very welcome, Senator. There's never a vote in the Dáil on a Tuesday evening, but this evening there's a series of votes to reduce the carbon tax and the excise duty on diesel, so some of the TDs are going to be delayed in coming in. But tonight really is about the mothers, and my heart breaks. I've been on a journey with these mothers since 2018, and these mothers are the salt of the earth. They are mothers whose children have been taken into state care by TUSLA. They are mothers who reported child sex abuse and ended up being accused of parental alienation, losing custody of their children to the perpetrators of the sexual abuse, and being blocked from seeing their children for years on end. And any other group of people that are being abused by the state can stand outside Leinster House and they can speak freely about what is happening to them. But the mothers that we represent in the Alliance of Birth Mothers cannot do that, because to speak about what the state is doing to them is actually a breach of what's called the in-camera rule, and it is a jailing offence. And a number of mothers have actually gone to jail and served lengthy sentences because they spoke out, particularly on social media, about what was happening to them. And I suppose to work around what was happening, back in 2022, I interviewed 20 mothers, and they told me their story of what was happening. And then I got 20 women to do voiceovers. And I did a series of podcasts that were published to Spotify. And they had a thematic approach. The issues, when we did a thematic analysis of what the mothers said to me in the interviews, I was doing this under the supervision of Dr. Finbar Markey, who guided me through the process. And so a number of issues came up, like lack of access to their children in care, the failure to reunite mothers with their children, and a whole series of issues. And so that is the basis for this book, Justice for Birth Mothers, the fight against forced separation in modern Ireland. So this book contains the transcripts of what the mothers said to me in the interview. Now, we have pseudonyms, so their anonymity is completely protected. And the anonymity of the mothers is further protected by the fact that, say for example, a mother telling me about losing custody of her children when she reported child sex abuse. It's not possible to pinpoint that to any one mother, because it is happening to so many mothers. And that was highlighted almost 40 times by the former Fine Gael TD, Deputy Bernard Durkin. So tonight is about the mothers and giving them a voice to what is happening to them. And I'm just going to touch on some of the issues that came up. Now, one of them is how the children were taken. You know, the Ombudsman published a report today. It can be better, or I think might be the name of it. No, Let's Get It Right. That's the name of the Ombudsman, the Children's Ombudsman report that was published today. And he actually said that some of the children in state care that have been taken into state care by TUSLA, that they would actually be better with their families because of what is happening to them in state care. They are being sexually abused in state care. They are going missing in state care. They are being put into emergency accommodation that's not regulated. So we hear all of this in the news, we read about it in the newspapers, and I want to pay tribute to the journalists who are highlighting this on an almost daily basis at this stage. And I want to pay a particularly warm tribute to Kitty Holland and also to Debbie McCann, who have done amazing work in highlighting what is actually happening. But, you know, the figure came out today, there's 6,000 children in care. But it's just a figure. But how do the children get into care? So there's a chapter in the book where mothers are describing how their children were actually taken. So, say for example, Lucy, now that's a pseudonym. Lucy, her son was killed in a traffic accident, and she developed a problem with alcohol, and she went to TUSLA looking for help, and her child went into voluntary care and then was returned to her. But then subsequent to that, while she was sober, completely sober, TUSLA decided in their wisdom that they were going to take their child, that they were going to take her child back into care. And the day on which they decided to take the child was actually over at a friend's apartment, and the social worker said they would go and collect the child there. So this is Lucy's words. They arrived with masks and a support worker. They said they needed me to come with them to collect my daughter, and then they changed their minds. My friend rang to say they were banging on her apartment door. My child was hysterical, running around the apartment complex with the support worker chasing her. I took her home to pack a bag. The worker told her that she would be back home to me in 6 days. She was gone for 12 weeks. The emergency foster mother said that she would never work with TUSLA again after they took my daughter against her will, my will, and forcing her into long-term care. My daughter was only 5, she's 9 now, and she still has nightmares and avoids closeness with me. It is child torture. Now, the next mother is Sophie, and she is one of the mothers who reported child sex abuse, and she was accused of parental alienation by one of these court experts. Now, these experts are operating in the courts. They don't have qualifications. Some of them are not even Garda vetted to interview children. They write up reports accusing the mother of parental alienation. The judge abides by that, and the children are actually handed over to the perpetrators of the sexual abuse. Now, this is something that Debbie McCann has highlighted in a number of reports in the Mail on Sunday, and she actually named one of these assessors who had actually been named in the Dáil by Deputy Bernard Durkin. This is what she said. The court expert told the judge I was guilty of parental alienation. My children were to be taken immediately. That day, Gardaí removed them from school in distress and forced them into his car. The next day, TUSLA rang to say the children were refusing to eat. I said it was stress from what was done to them. The worker said it was appropriate the way in which they were taken from me. At school, they are punished if they try to leave or show distress. The principal facilitates the father removing them unseen, sometimes holding onto them until he comes late. She has completely ignored bruises and hunger. I complained about mandated persons failing to report abuse. 𝒕📬 admitted it was wrong, but said the law was too weak to enforce it. That astounds me. And this is a subject that Finbar is going to come back to, how the children were actually taken. The other issue that I want to bring to your attention is the removal of newborn babies. And we had a press launch here in this hotel in, I think it was around September 2019. And I said at that press launch that holding a mother in my arms hours after her newborn baby has been removed from her, the screams of that mother I will bring with me to the grave. It is absolutely horrific and it's horrendous. What the mothers fall into two strict categories. Either they were victims of domestic violence, or they had mental health issues, maybe when they were teenagers, and that is used as a reason to remove their newborn babies. And what's put on the report for the court is potential future harm. So it's not as if they have been guilty or found guilty of causing any harm to their children, but it's, the potential. Some social worker decides that it could happen in the future, but it is absolutely, and I know this sounds very crude, but I grew up on a farm, and you would not take a newborn calf off a cow. Well, first of all, if you attempted to do so, the cow would go for you and kill you stone dead, so you wouldn't attempt to do it. But you just wouldn't do it. Nor you wouldn't take a newborn litter of pups from its mother, or a litter of kittens from its mother. But we're doing it to human beings, and 𝒕📬 do not record the number of newborn babies that they take. What they record is the number of children under a year old that are taken into care. So that camouflages the number of babies that they're taking. So I'm going to read Tammy's account. Tammy was in a very violent relationship, and her partner ended up in jail, and 𝒕📬 removed her children, and she could not get them back for love nor money. Now, what often happens, and this has been documented by Dr. Karen Broadhurst from the University of Lancaster, it's very common for mothers, when their children are taken, to become pregnant almost immediately. It's as if they're trying to fill a void. So Tammy's children were taken. The partner is in jail for violence. He got a very lengthy sentence, and she got pregnant. So this is what she says. At 12 weeks pregnant, I was red flagged. From that moment until the birth, I was harassed with constant calls and texts. They said I failed to protect my children, even though I was the victim. When my baby was born, 𝒕📬 marked him 𝒕📬 They never let me out of their sight. I was treated like a criminal in court and punished into agreeing an interim care order. At 5 days old, they took him from the back door of the hospital. I had to hand him over myself. I expressed breast milk, but they let it spoil in the cars. They stopped me breastfeeding at access visits. They did everything possible to break the bond between me and my son. I begged them to let me go to a mother and baby home, but they refused. The weeks after he was taken were like living in a black hole. I was here, but not really here. I felt ashamed and broken. tusla destroyed me. Now, subsequent to that, she got pregnant again. And again, tusla, during her pregnancy, told her that they were going to take the baby as soon as it was born. But what she did, just before she gave birth, she managed to flee to Northern Ireland. And she presented to social services in Northern Ireland. And what they did was they supported her through the birth. They supported the whole way through the assessments, the parental capacity assessments that she had failed under tusla. She passed with flying colours in Northern Ireland. She was allowed to keep her baby. And today, social services in Northern Ireland actually have her as a volunteer mentor for other mothers. And her baby is now coming up on 5 years of age. And had she remained in the Republic, that child would be gone from her. Now, I brought 3 issues to Kate Duggan when I had a face-to-face meeting with Kate Duggan, who is the CEO of tusla. And that was one of the cases that I brought to her. tusla have refused to reunite that mother that's living in Northern Ireland with her children. She now has 2 children. Have refused to reunite her with the children that they took from her in the first place. Now, finally, I just want to touch on the issue of the child sex abuse, which I've already alluded to. So, Amy's children disclosed sexual abuse by their father. She went to the guards and to tusla, believing that her children's voices would be heard. Instead, she found herself treated as the person under suspicion. This is what she said. I noticed changes in the behaviour of my children, and they made subsequent disclosures to me, telling me that they had been sexually abused. I went to the guards and I went to tusla, and I suppose I was very naive in terms of the system. I did not realise that from the beginning, when I actually made the report, that I would be the one who would be investigated and not the person that my children named as their abusers. I was put through numerous meetings with tusla. It was very clear that I was not believed and that my children were not believed. My children would also have attended their own meetings with tusla, and they obviously knew that they were not believed by them. The guards tried to interview my children. I felt at this point that tusla had interfered hugely with the Garda process, and so the interviews didn't go ahead because of tusla and the court assessor, or that would be the court expert, who was on my case. My experience at the family law court was that they only listened to the assessor in this situation. Basically, the assessor was judge and jury, and we were not really heard in that process at all. I would attend the hearing, and the assessor would then give his account of what he felt was happening and the recommendations he was making. The recommendations were always accepted, and there was very little chance to appeal that or have it challenged in any way. Now, elsewhere in the book, Amy describes how her children were taken. They were actually taken out of school. And that is a recurring theme that occurs. That they sometimes go into the schools and take the children out of the schools. in full view of their friends. And one mother described how she went down to collect her children, and when she got there, there were a number of Garda cars and social workers all parked up at the school, and the children were brought out and bundled into the cars and taken away. So it really is horrific. And as I say, tonight is about these mothers who are victims of state abuse. And I say repeatedly that the state abuse of mothers and children did not end with the closure of the last mother and baby home. The state abuse continues in an unbroken chain, and the agents of that abuse today are TUSLA, the family court system, and to a much lesser extent, the Gardaí. And so I'll hand over now to Finbar. Finbar is the secretary to the Alliance for Mothers.
First of all, thanks everybody for coming here. We were getting worried when we heard that there was a vote in the Dáil and lots of things happening tonight, so we didn't know what kind of numbers we would have. We'd like to particularly thank the small number of TDs and senators who have come together from across the parties and independents who are determined to create change, not in 10 or 15 or 20 years' time, but within the term of this Dáil, if that's possible to do. So we'd like to thank those politicians, but we need more of them on board. And we would encourage you, wherever you are in the country, to contact your local TDs and let them know that this exists. This is a milestone. Never before has the stories of mothers, uncensored, been brought to the ears and the eyes of the people in this country. I hope, and Anna hopes, that this book becomes standard reading for all social workers in college when they're studying, all applied social care workers, all politicians, anybody who has any influence or works in the field into the future needs to read this book. This is not opinions from me, it's not opinions from Anna. This is the experience of those mothers. Most of all, we want to thank those mothers. We have been contacted over the years by hundreds of mothers who've got similar stories. Most of them petrified to say anything, even under the promise of anonymity. The 20 mothers that agreed to do this are some of the bravest women in this country, because they are still, although they're covered and they can't be identified, every morning they're waking up and they think, I hope nobody figures out that was me in that book, because of the fear that they have of being taken to court and being jailed for actually telling their story. So in terms of what TUSLA has become, a lot of people would like to infer that this is just a few bad apples. Now, my academic career is focused on organizational cultures and how to change them. And bad apples become rotten barrels of apples if it isn't addressed. That's the reality. We're long past the point of having a few bad apples. The barrel is now completely rotten. You can smell the alcohol coming from it. It's so rotten at this stage. So something has to be done. People have to stand up. The mothers themselves cannot stand up. And that's the key problematic that we have. Some of the bravest women in the country, as far as I'm concerned. In terms of the contents of this book, it's hard reading. It's easy reading from the point of view. It's not fancy. This isn't from an academic. This is the mother's own words. So it's not fancy reading, but it's hard reading because the stories that come out here. Imagine you dropped your children to school one morning, not knowing anything was going on behind the scenes, and you went to pick them up that evening and were told that they're gone. They're in care. They've been moved down to the other end of the country. Because parental alienation is touched on in this book. The biggest alienators are actually TUSLA. When your child is taken into care, they will do everything to ensure that your relationship is destroyed with that child. They will move the child as far away as possible so that you can't see them. They will limit the communication. If you as a mother express your emotional concern to your child, you're seen as emotionally abusing your child. So the stories in here are very hard to read, but we all have to read them because it's happening to your neighbours. You don't know about it. It's happening to sometimes even your sister, your cousin, and we don't know about it because they can't even by law speak to their family about what's going on. So this book is a key milestone because it's the first time that their collective stories has been presented in any format that's accessible to the general public. We make no money whatsoever from this book. It cost €8, and that's the publishing cost of this book. We wanted to ensure that nobody could ever accuse us of trying to profit off the hurt and the pain that mothers have felt in the past. I want to just, again, because this focuses on the mothers itself, I'd just like to read a few short extracts myself to give you an idea about what these women and so many hundreds more women around the country are going through as we speak. I'd like to speak about Roseanne and her experience of having her child taken off her. So this is just a bit of information about Roseanne first. 𝒕🊓 obtained an emergency court order to remove Roseanne's children because of her husband's mental health difficulties. She was not told about the hearing. The first she knew of it was when social workers and Gardaí arrived at her door. And these are the words of Roseanne. That morning, my partner had a meeting with social workers. The receptionist told him that they were going to court for an emergency order. It was ex parte, which means they weren't going to tell their mother. I knew nothing about it. They arrived at my house just after 4 in the afternoon. The screams of the children, I'll never forget. My eldest kept saying, I'm sorry for being bold. She lost so much weight and care that one guard even apologised to me. This happened 9 years ago and I still waking up with nightmares. Another mother called Clara. Clara came to Ireland from the United Kingdom after testifying in court against a dangerous criminal. Within days, Gardaí were at her home. Her children were taken 3 times, always by the Gardaí, often while she was in custody on what turned out to be flimsy grounds. These are the words of Clara. The first time I was detained for a supposed motoring offence. While I was in custody, they went to the children's school and took them without question. I later appealed to the circuit court. The judge ordered they be returned to me within 4 days. 𝒕🊓 could not produce any evidence of child protection issues. The second time, they detained me again, and months later admitted it was an error. No apology. They kept my eldest daughter in foster care and later targeted the younger 2, taking them from school in full view of friends and family. 5 guards surrounded my car, making my children sob before driving them away. Each time, they were fine until the moment the Gardaí arrived. Then the trauma began. This is Chrissy's story. Chrissy is a grandmother who stepped in to support her daughter and grandchildren, one of whom was seriously ill. Social workers removed the children from the garden while they played and later took the sick child too as soon as the medical crisis had passed. These are the words of Chrissy. Social workers came in the afternoon while the children were happily playing in the garden with friends. They took them against their will, crying and screaming. The social workers told me to lie, to say that they were going away for a little while, and I refused. They left the sick grandchild with me. I nursed the child through multiple operations. As soon as that child recovered fully, 𝒕🊓 came and took that child too, placing them in foster care. In terms of when a mother informs services or informs the Gardaí that their child has been sexually abused by their partner, again we see this issue of allegations of parental alienation. This is May's story. May was in an abusive marriage marked by domestic violence and coercive control. After the relationship ended, one of her children disclosed that she'd been sexually abused by her father. May did what was responsible, or a responsible parent would do. She contacted 𝒕🊓 and the Gardaí. Her children were later taken into state care. Maeve says, my daughter made 11 disclosures of sexual abuse, and the very first one I rang 𝒕🊓 and I could not get them. I could not get them for a week, and they never got back to me. I phoned the Gardaí, and that was delayed as well, and they didn't do anything for the whole while. 𝒕🊓 was getting disclosures through other agencies like refuges, and they still were ignoring me. They just wanted to talk about my husband's concerns about my mental health. They did not want to talk about the sexual abuse at all. The police took a statement from me, but would not interview my daughter. 𝒕🊓 lied and said that I was not engaging when I was the one who went to them. So the police said I was not engaging too. Finally, it came to a very serious last disclosure. I emailed the chief executive and I said this has been outrageous, and that when they called to my door and came on board, still saying that I was not engaging. It appears the 11th disclosure was so bad that they had to cover their tracks and say that I was not engaging, when in actual fact I had met them with my aunt and my adult son, with them knowing that they would blame me. I had been following in the media a lot of mums being blamed for different things, so I went with other people to meet them, and they still said I was not engaging. Court case after court case took place where they said I was not engaging. Then I fell ill and was not in court on one day. I sent an email and a doctor's certificate to the court. That was when they came that night and took my children. They came with a people carrier and 10 Gardaí with stab vests and surrounded the house. 𝒕🊔 had been to my house the day before the court and were sitting in my sitting room talking to me, and they still went in and told the judge that I was not engaging. Every effort was made not to see the children on their part and blame me for not engaging. This is how they took them into care. Now in May's story we see that the pattern that appears throughout the chapter. Repeated disclosures from a child, repeated attempts by the mother to engage services, and an official narrative that paints her as the problem and uses that narrative to justify the removal of her children. Now, sometimes we would get responses, that these are rare cases. This is a very unusual thing. When you interview 20 mothers and all their stories are exactly the same in terms of manipulation of information, fabrication of information, about pathological behaviour, manipulating on Gardaí Síochána, manipulating the courts, telling blatant lies, and because they have a master's degree in social work, they cannot be questioned as far as most judges are concerned. Bringing in non-clinical psychologists. So let's talk about the difference between somebody who's just come out of college, having studied 3 years in psychology, and a clinical psychologist. That's okay, Chris. A lot of these professionals that have been taken into court did 3 years in college studying psychology, but they have no actual experience other than reading books. If you're a clinical psychologist, it means that you went into different clinical settings under senior psychologists and studied with them for maybe 4 or 5 years. It's not clinical psychologists that are being used in the course. It's young people coming in that 𝒕🊔 know they're desperate for a wage. We'll get them to say anything that we want them to say, and they will do it. And then when they have 1 or 2 psychologists that they know will always go along with it, they're their preferred choice every time. If a mother decides, I'm going to bring in my own independent psychologist and try to have that information submitted to the court, they're denied the right to do so, when they're actually bringing in an actual clinical psychologist and proper professionals. So this book, for the first time, strips away the bullshit, strips away the lies, and reveals to this entire country what's going on in 𝒕🊔. And it's not going to get any better until people read this book. It's €8. You can scan it on a barcode outside. I think there's a barcode here. I would encourage everybody to do it. We want this to be sitting in every house in Ireland, so that everybody knows what's going on and something can be done about it. Because most politicians find this very discomforting and they don't want to get involved. It's not a nice. We prefer to talk about the new building that we're opening, the new ship that we're launching, but we don't want to deal with the nitty-gritty. Well, it needs to be dealt with. On a final note, I'd like to really thank Anna Kavanagh for her application, her diligence over the last 4 years, and especially with the creation of the podcast, which this book comes from those podcasts. The work that she's done, the negative responses that she gets from people who are biased and partisan, who attack her online for the work that she's doing, but she continues and she persists, and I think she really does deserve a round of applause. So I'm saying that, I'm going to pass it back on to Anna now.
Behind every woman there's a great man.
Oh, stop it.
And I have Finbar, who is our secretary, and he is just amazing. I also want to pay tribute to my partner, Philip, the quiet man who gives me unbelievable support, because I'm not just saying it, the advocacy that I'm doing is very difficult. And so he is there, he's my rock, and he's there to support me. And also my daughter, Maeve, huge support to me. I'm going to before I call on Deputy Corky, just Senator Chris Andrews from Sinn Féin was here, and I want to acknowledge that. And he is a member of the Dáil all-party group on family court reform that was formed last November after we had Dr. Charlotte Proudman, who is a renowned UK barrister, over to address TDs and senators. And also another member of that all-party group is Deputy Paul Gogarty. So Deputy, maybe you might just come forward and say a few words. You can sit here, and Paul, you, yeah.
Don't mind where I sit.
Yeah, you can sit here
You can stand
beside
if you
me.
Grand. Good evening, everyone. I'm Paul. I'm one of the TDs that's on the committee. I was a TD up until 2011, and I probably have one of the biggest gaps between getting re-elected again. I got re-elected in November 2024, and the reason I'm saying that is that issues of the family law courts and coercive control were issues that I was aware of before I got re-elected to Dáil Éireann, and in fact I'd raised at a council level. In particular, I had raised the issue of the often used tool of the false accusations of parental alienation, and I had tabled a motion as a councillor, and unfortunately a parental alienation advocacy group got in touch with another councillor to table a motion that totally overturned that motion. And as we know, there are cases where parents, through their life situations, through stress, or deliberately do try and alienate their kids. But what's more appalling and systemic is those situations where, as the book has shown, so many parents are the ones who go and make the reports about abuse, and then it's turned around on them, and they're accused of parental alienation. And I'm not going to mention, I'm not even going to grace his name in this forum, but we have one particular expert who is an advocate of the cult of parental alienation syndrome, and it's used constantly that as if a woman, a bit like when women were prone to flights of fancy in the 1800s, and that they couldn't be trusted with the vote, they couldn't be trusted with anything because they're so flighty. All of a sudden you get this syndrome coming upon a woman, and she's alienating her kids for no apparent reason against the poor man. To be clear, the situation, the stories here are from women. We know that there are parental disputes. We know that people suffer on both sides. We know that women can be as manipulative as men. But why is it that all the stories coming through in the podcast that led to this book are women? Because the system is geared against them. And that's something I've tried to raise, firstly on the council, and now as a TD, where among others, we've been calling for the removal of the in-camera rule in the family court system, because there's absolutely no reason why it shouldn't be removed. Obviously, you have to protect names. You cannot report a child, make anyone identifiable, but you can report the situation. You can report why a judge says, Professor X, I take your word, I don't need any more voice of the child in, you'll do, thank you very much. When Professor X has got $8,000 to do up a report that's supposed to be an unbiased report, but it's coming from the parent who can afford to pay, which is usually the man. That sort of stuff needs to have a light shone upon it. You see, when you shine light on maggots and creepy crawlies, they scurry away to try and get back into the darkness. And that's what we need the family law courts. Maybe with the best will in the world, the system is biased because of inherent flaws, but equally, when you have the tusla, as you mentioned, Finbar, the fact that the rotten barrel gets more rotten because of the starter fermentation process. There are people who go into the system with the best training, the best intentions, and the system swallows them up. And they're told to do X and told to do Y, and all of a sudden the voice of the child is totally lost in this, and the mother who has been trying to advocate for her child becomes the villain, and is absolutely defiled by the system. That's the only word I can say. And you mentioned that politicians would be horrified by this, and we are. And it is easier to, as we had a vote recently, to go in and talk about why the government isn't doing enough to tackle the rising cost of fuel. It's a very simple subject. This is a lot more complex. It's very nuanced in many cases, but unfortunately we haven't seen the movement that we've needed. So the one quote that came to me from the book, I have the Kindle version, by the way. You can download it as well as get the physical one. And the only line I want to read from the book, because everything else has been said, is this book is a call not to look away, it is a call to act. So anyone who's been brought to the attention of the podcast, brought to the attention of what's in the book, has a moral obligation to act. And I was scratching my head. Obviously, the committee is working together. One of its members hasn't been able to attend as regularly in recent weeks, so we haven't had a formal meeting as often as we'd like, and we hope to get that moving again. But I don't think you can wait around long enough. So every probably 8 or 9 months I get a private member's business slot. I'm in a group at 7TD, so I got one in September, and the next one I have is coming up in April. So this has reinforced what I was thinking of anyway, but I'm going to use the book as the hook. I'm going to table the motion in my private member's slot about what the book has revealed and what its asks are. It's not going to change anything initially, I doubt very much, but it's just shining a little bit of extra light, giving TDs the opportunity to speak for 2 hours on the issue and putting it into the ball of the Minister for Justice. So that's my commitment. In a month's time, I'm going to use the book as the lead-in to the issues in terms of the family law courts and in terms of reform of TUSLA. And I hope that will generate some debate, and I hope it'll give some further coverage for the book, because the more people read the book, the more people will want to see action. So thank you very much for the invitation tonight, and I wish you all very well.
And thank you both.
Thank you so much. There's 170, is it 170 TDs?
74, yeah,
174 TDs. And out of that 174, there's only a handful of TDs engaging with us. And I suppose I want to pay special tribute to Deputy Bernard Durkin, who brought this to the floor of Dáil Éireann on almost 40 occasions over the course of 2 years. I also want to pay tribute to Deputy Matty McGrath, who sends his apologies. He cannot be here this evening for family reasons. And he has been absolutely amazing. He has met with mothers on several occasions that I took to Leinster House. I also want to pay tribute to Deputy John McGuinness, who has raised the issue of TUSLA time and time again. And he is actually on record in the Dáil as saying that if something isn't done immediately to stop what is happening, that we're going to be back to issuing state apologies to the victims of this state abuse. And again, he has met with groups of mothers. I hope I'm not... Senator Sharon Keoghan has raised it in the Seanad. Also Deputy Paul Murphy. And our book has been endorsed by a number of TDs who have written nice things that they're on the inside cover. I also want to pay huge tribute to Deputy 𝒕𝒊𝒄𝒆. He has been absolutely amazing, and I worked very closely with his PA Luke Silk. So the book has been endorsed by John McGuinness, 𝒕𝒊𝒄𝒆, Conor Sheehan, Labour TD, Senator Sharon Keoghan, Dr. Charlotte Proudman, Matty McGrath and Gillian Toole. I'll just read, because it's short, I'll just read out what Deputy 𝒕𝒊𝒄𝒆 said. It is vitally important that the voices of birth mothers whose children have been taken into care are listened to. From my engagement with many mothers, it is clear that a significant number feel aggrieved by the child protection and family court system and believe there is no adequate or fair means through which their experiences can be properly heard. This book makes an important contribution by placing those voices on the public record and ensuring they receive the serious consideration they deserve. And I just, if there's anybody else that...
Can I just follow up on something that Paul said a few minutes ago?
Yes.
About parental alienation and also the in-camera rule in the courts. In 2021 into 2022 in England and Wales, they piloted a number of schemes with regards to the in-camera rule in courts. Now, the in-camera rule in Ireland, in the Irish Republic, there's a presumption that you're not allowed to report anything. That's the presumption. This pilot scheme introduced in the UK, in Scotland and Wales in 21, 22, 23, actually inverted that presumption. So now there's a presumption you can report everything other than the names of the people involved. And the judge will give a list of what you cannot report on that may be identifiable, but the judge has to rationalise why. You can't just say you're not reporting it on anymore. So we're not, and the pilot, so that's now all across England and Wales, and the pilot was introduced in the north of Ireland a few months ago, and it's working well everywhere. One of the top judicial review guys actually made a statement, I can't remember his name, Lord something or other, made a statement to the effect that this has not been abused once since it was introduced. So this idea that, oh, the anonymity, people are going to be, that doesn't happen. It's not happening. In terms of alienation, in England and Wales, they've also introduced a new rule that if anybody makes an allegation of child sexual abuse, irrespective of whether you think it's parental alienation or not, it has to be investigated. In Ireland, there's no, well, we would presume that you have to investigate, but it's not happening. And there's a presumption that we won't investigate it because it's a lot easier to claim parental alienation than to conduct a lengthy investigation. So we are not reinventing the wheel here. It's been done. Our laws were very similar between the UK and Ireland. So it can be done quickly, but we need the political impetus to do it. We have Paul, we have maybe in total about 15 senators and TDs that are backing us at the moment. We need to bring that up to the 174, and Paul is a major part of making that happen. And so we really appreciate, over the last year in particular, he's turned up at everything. Normally we get excuses, but he has turned up at everything, and he's thinking about it in his own time because he comes to us with ideas and plans, like he just said a few minutes ago. So again, thanks for that. But we're not reinventing the wheel. This should not take a decade to change. It should take a year at the most to make these changes.
I think it is time to draw this to a close. I want to acknowledge Conor Lenihan. He's here, and I met Conor at a conference in Limerick a couple of years ago, and I just sent him a text message, and lo and behold, he turns up tonight. He's a former minister, and I really do appreciate you being here, Conor. And I just want to, I suppose, end on a note to address all of the mothers and their children who are victims of state abuse, who are victims of Tussler, who are victims of the family courts, who are a victim of some Gardaí. We will continue to advocate to the utmost, to the best of our ability, to ensure that you do get justice. And I just want to mention that a number of fathers actually have contacted us. There are men who are victims of this as well, but we were set up to support mothers, and we made the decision that if we were to bring men into it, it would kind of broaden it out too much. So there are support groups for men who are victims, and I work closely with a number of the men in these organisations. So this is not about being anti-man. In actual fact, we find in the Alliance that some of our best supporters are actually men. So I'm just going to bring these proceedings to a close. I want to thank you so much for turning out here tonight. It's really, really appreciated, and I'm going to thank you on behalf of our mothers. Yes?
Would you consider, if we organised a function or a meeting in Donegal, would you consider?
Yes, we'll talk to you afterwards. Okay. this is just the first book launch. This was kind of to capture the media and to capture TDs and senators, and I think myself and Finbar will be travelling around the country to launch the book in various parts of the country. And I suppose if we get invites,
drop us an email.
I know this couple from Donegal. Okay, yes. Would you like to come forward, Leisha? Is it Leisha? Is it Leisha?
Yes.
Yeah, Leisha. Would you like to come forward?
Person yet, so we're like parasocial colleagues.
Sorry.
Sorry, I know you were trying to wrap up.
No, you're
No,
okay.
that's okay.
Sorry, I
This,
had another event,
I
that's
just
why I'm late.
I just introduced you. We've never met, but we have been talking on the phone in the last week or two. This is Leisha de Brun, who is a barrister, and she's kindly come along to the launch tonight, and she has first-hand experience of what is going on inside in the family court, an insight that I wouldn't have. She has that insight as a barrister.
Yeah, so my first, actually it was as a campaigner that I came across parental alienation before I was called to the bar. And there's a very big grassroots feminist organisation called 𝑦𝒊𝒈𝒂𝒊𝒄𝒆. They're the biggest grassroots feminist organisation in Europe. And they had done a deep dive into the industry of parental alienation in Ireland, and what they found was that a lot of people were making a lot of money out of it. It had no evidence base whatsoever, and all of Europe was turning away from it. And so I spoke about that at one of their events, and then when I was called to the bar, I am trained in crime, and in the criminal courts there's a kind of healthy sense that obviously it's up to the state to, the onus of proof is always on the prosecution. And there's a kind of healthy sense always of that balance in terms of a citizen versus the organs of the state. And when I started working in family law, in the family courts, it absolutely shocked me how it was inverted. So even though these are ordinary people who are up against the organs of the state, it's that balance is completely skewed. So what I've observed as a practitioner is that there's a huge coziness between the judges, the family court judges, and the assessors, who are obviously not regulated or supervised in any way. I completely agree with the previous point about young kids straight out of college who are so malleable, who aren't, rigorously trained clinical psychologists. And I have clients myself where it's very clear that coercive control is just continuing on via the courts. And no one is aware of this. There's no sense of a trauma, understanding of trauma or understanding of coercive control. But I think I'm really hopeful, very, very optimistic in terms of your endeavour, because you've got a proper cross-party group, so-called left and right and everything in between. I think that's really powerful. And I also think from my own advocacy, I know that the most powerful tool is an emotive story, because it's not facts. Facts don't win arguments, it's actually emotion. So I wish you the very best of luck, and I'm delighted to be part of whatever I can do to help you, and thank you for, I'm honoured to be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to David French. And David's sister Valerie was murdered by her husband, and David has written a book about that, and he is a huge advocate for women who have been murdered and for the families of women who have been murdered. So over to you, David.
Not prepared, but just to follow up on what Leisha just said, the power of an individual story is massive. The book that I did for Valerie basically recounted the story that we had after my sister's husband murdered her, leaving 3 children. The kind of relevance to this forum here is that the 3 children were immediately taken by tusla, and the killer, who was in prison suspected of charged with murder, was fully prioritised by tusla. We wanted the kids. tusla took them into care. That's basically what they did, they made a condition that anyone minding those kids would have to be able to take those kids in to prison to see him, and that they shouldn't let their attitude towards the killer affect the children's relationship with the father. This still continues. 𝒕📊are writing family reunification reports. The children are still in care. 𝒕📊have spent thousands fighting in court. I applied for notice party status. 𝒕📊fought me. I won costs. The killer appealed. 𝒕📊supported him. I won again. I won costs. They paid up after about 10 months, and that was last month. Currently I'm looking at applying to be guardian of the kids, and I fully expect to be doing that against 𝒕📊. The 𝒊𝒈's law is the suspension of guardianship in these cases to allow the family law courts on the foot of a murder verdict to suspend the guardianship of someone who has been convicted of manslaughter or murder. And that's subject to court discretion. There are edge cases where it may not make sense in the best interest of the child. It's very separate from contact. So if a clinical psychologist says contact with the killer is good for the child, in some weird state might be, then that can go ahead. The point of suspending guardianship is to strip powers from the killer and protect the privacy of the children. There is equivalent legislation in the UK called Jade's Law, came in the Victims and Prisoners Bill. It hasn't actually been implemented, but it's gone through the full system. Rishi Sunak signed it off just before he lost power, but it will get implemented. It's in the program for government here since 2025. We had the Oireachtas Committee in July, the report in October, and Minister Jim O'Callaghan is fully on board, and he's mentioned it several times in the Dáil, currently awaiting the draft legislation to come out, and very thankful for the wide support, cross-party support from TDs and senators that I've been speaking with so far. Sorry, Stach.
Thank you so
very
much. So I think on that note we'll finish with a round of applause for the many mothers around Ireland who are the victims of state abuse, the agents of that abuse being tossed at the family courts and some Gardaí. A round of applause just to let them know that you're thinking of them. Thank you for watching. Please like and share.